Islam, Moorish kin. Honors to all of you that are on the manifest now. We just have a little measure we want to set out. And it's actually entitled Masterminds Able to Trace Themselves Back, and thus they know. And we just want to set the record straight in a few areas, mainly for those who may not be familiar with who the Moors are, and as well as those who may be familiar with who we are, but don't mind furthering their understanding, so to speak. And so it's a historical lesson, but we got some proofs that we want to bring on the manifest in regards to dealing with correcting those who have a misunderstanding as to what a Moor is, our origin and everything else. Peace and love, Kamari vibes, honors to you. Yes, sir. So basically what I got right here, I want to deal with the Book of Ali. And first, before I do anything, I want to rise and give all praises to the great God Allah and honors to his holy prophet, honors to our holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali, El-Hajj Sharif Abdul Ali, that is. I give honors to my Moorish kin here, there, and everywhere, and therefore honors to all of you who are honoring yourselves by being yourselves. And basically giving honors, most definitely we honor everybody that's here. If you are demonstrating from the Moorish paradigm, Islam to you, you're demonstrating from the aspects of the movement of those who push along the lines of the Garveyite demonstration. Ashe to you, brothers and sisters. Man, we can give greetings all night. Salaam alaikum rahmatullah, Ramadan Mubarak to all those who are Muslims that are fasting or whatever you may be doing along the way in this time. Shalom to the Hebrew brothers and sisters in the community, and everybody that is on the manifest. Peace, peace to the gods and earths for those that are 5%ers. Honors to everybody. But what we want to deal with, again, this is the Book of Ali, by the way. It's a great work right here that was authored by the Grand National Chairman. And actually, I'm going to be touching on some of the stuff that I have in my timeline. And this is dealing with Egypt. Pardon self, Egypt, the capital empire in the dominion of Africa. There's certain aspects on this I want to touch on because a lot of people believe that this is made up. This is some make-believe information that our prophet brought on the manifest. We're going to show you that nothing can be further from the truth. Now, I want you to listen to me closely, family, because there's going to be some high science coming out of this measure here. Egypt, capital empire and dominion of Africa. The inhabitants of Africa are the descendants of the ancient Canaanites from the land of Canaan. Old man Cush and his family are the first inhabitants of Africa who came from the land of Canaan. His father Ham and his family were second. Then came the word Ethiopia, which means demarcation line of the dominion of Amexem, the first true and divine name of Africa, the dividing of the land between the Father and the Son. The dominion of Cush, northeast and southeast Africa, and northwest and southwest, was his father's dominion of Africa. In later years, many of their brethren from Asia and the Holy Lands joined them. The Moabites from the land of Moab, who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit the northwest Africa, they were the founders and are the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire. It's very key that we understand that the ancient Moabites were the founders and true possessors of the present-day Moroccan Empire. There's a difference in being a founder and one who is descending from this measure. We'll get into that later. But it states where their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brethren who sojourned from the land of Canaan seeking new homes. Their dominion and inhabitation extended from the northeast and southwest Africa across the great Atlantis, even unto the present North, South, and Central America, and also Mexico and the Atlantis Islands before the great earthquake, which caused the great Atlantic Ocean. The river Nile was dredged and made by the ancient pharaohs of Egypt in order to trade with the surrounding kingdoms. Also, the Niger River was dredged by the great pharaoh of Egypt in those ancient days for trade, and it extends eastward from the river, the Nile, and the westward across the great Atlantic. Okay? Across the great Atlantic. So it goes on to state as well, Moorish kin. I'm trying to figure out this drawing on here. Okay, it said it was used for trade and transportation. According to all true and divine records of the human race, there is no Negro, black, or colored race attached to the human family because all inhabitants of Africa are of the human race, descendants of the ancient Canaanite nation from the Holy Land of Canaan, where your ancient forefathers were. You are today without doubt or contradiction. There is no one who is able to change from man the descendant nature of his fathers or forefathers unless his power extends beyond that of the great universal creator, Allah himself. These holy and divine laws are from Prophet Noble Ali, the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Grand draw. Now, basically, what was read, many of our family, Moorish kin, may already be familiar with, in their own ways of research and so forth and so on. But we want to kind of go down a timeline, so to speak. And we want to start with the beginning because we want you to know, how you were made, and getting straight to the point. As you heard the prophet mention, he spoke of the ancient Moabite people being those who was of the great Atlantis, so to speak. And a lot of people believe that Atlantis is some mythical place, that it actually didn't exist. Well, we actually have, a grand measure of proof to demonstrate, that, again, if you believe that, nothing can be further from the truth. Atlantis was actually a real place. Atlantis actually dealt with most of what we call the Moroccan Empire today, all the way back to Chemic. As a matter of fact, Atlantis was even used to refer to the whole continent in certain aspects, and you will see a little bit later. As I give you names, when I go through these special measures, if you can, you got a phone or whatever, you can go into your desktop or laptop, look certain things up as I'm moving along, and it will give you clarity as to what I'm speaking of. Or you can just go into certain recent posts that I have, and I'm actually touching on certain aspects of this measure anyway. But I just wanted to give clarity with it to make sure that people get a drawing, because this has to get out there to the public. So to begin going into this measure, when you hear the term Atlantis, and we're going to show you how all of this leads up to us being Moors, because that's the key. Masterminds are able to trace themselves back, and thus they know. So when you say Atlantis, and you go into the root of the word, you have Atlan. That's A-T-L-A-N often. But if you know anything about etymology and tracing words back to their root, you would also understand that a T is interchangeable with the letter D. So instead of having the A-T-A, you see, L-A-N, pardon self, you would have A-D. And then you just say land. Add land, as in the land that you live upon, or so to speak. Ad in the Arabic, is actually known as first. It means the first. This is why even the name Adam has Ad in it. There was also a people referred to in the Grand Quran of Mecca known as the Ad people. And it's said that they were destroyed. They were one of the civilizations that were destroyed. This is a good reference point. Some may already be familiar with the Ad people. So, peace and blessings to you as well, my brother. So these Ad people, just simply meaning the first people, are the people, of Adlan. But Adlan is also synonymous with what we call Aden. And Aden, which is Aden, is known as well by the term Eden, Eden. You see, or the Garden of Eden, right? So if that's the case, and we are dealing with Eden and Aden only changing between the A and the E, because just as the D is interchangeable with T in language, A is often interchangeable with the letter E as well. So when you see Garden of Eden, if you go into the root in Arabic, you will find Aden. You see? So this is said to be the first place in which the physical man was formed, often even referred to as the holy city of Mecca in our teachings, right? It is said that this is the root of civilization. This is not only the teaching of the Piscean records, or what we call the biblical texts, but this is also in line with, as we stated, the Quran. Even in, like we said, our 101s, it's the same teaching. And even if you go into the teachings of our brothers in the Nation of Islam, you heard them draw from that same teaching. The Hebrew Israelites, all of them agree, about this demonstration, where we are talking about this Garden of Eden, or Aden, so to speak, right? So, nevertheless, Moorish kin, when you go into this special aspect, basically, we're talking about man from the beginning. But we don't want to get so caught up in the manifest, just yet, because we want to actually go into man and how he begins to come into the manifest as well. Because we know man is a thought of the great God Allah manifested in the flesh. But as that thought prior to manifested in the flesh, he was spirit man, right? This is what we have a reference to in chapter 1 in the Moorish Holy Quran, right? So we know that spirit man was given a soul that he might function upon the plane of soul. And he was given a body of flesh that he might function upon the plane of things made manifest. Spirit man, right? Spirit man clothed with soul made in the form of Allah. This is the language that is used in the Moorish Holy Quran. And you often hear people use the term arm, leg, arm, head, and, man being made in the image of the great God. So all of this is key in dealing with man in his essence, when you're dealing with tracing yourself back to the origin or the source. In fact, right here in the book of Ali, when we deal with the divine origin, because I want people to know this stuff ain't just stuff that's just being made up. We got reference points along with our own research. This is one of my favorite subjects. I've been studying this subject for long as I've been conscious, the origin of man. And so here we have the divine origin in the commentaries. We are told that the divine origin is the hallowed beginning, the holy beginning, the great God's breath, infinite cause, sacred source, divine creation, pure activation, hollow start, godly opening, faithful foundation. This is dealing with the divine origin. So ain't nothing about that manifest when you're dealing with the divinity. All of that had to do with the love thought that we were referring to a few minutes ago, right? So, dealing with this special aspect, again, as we spoke of Atlantis being in reference to the whole continent, we also go into the measure of the people or the inhabitants of this land that was referred to as Adlan or Atlantis or the garden, so to speak. Because if you know anything about the history of Atlantis, it was always referred to as a garden. You see, the people that inhabited this place were known as the Lemurians or Elmorians, right? And it's spelled many different ways. But at the root, you would find Morian. Keep that in mind, right? The Lemurians are sometimes referred to even as Mu Lemuria. They were the inhabitants of this place, again, that we call Atlantic. So some people like to mix it up and say, well, the Atlanteans and the Lemurians, just referring to them as inhabitants, different groups. But in all actuality, you're really talking about the Atlanteans when you're talking about the Lemurians. And you're really talking about the Lemurians when you're talking about the Atlanteans. But namely emphasizing that the land referred to as Atlantis and the people or the inhabitants referred to as Lemurians. Now, most of our people get took off of course when they forget that even though a place may be called one thing in a certain era, that in another era it may unfold into a different name. You see? And this has been done throughout the annals of history. You see, you might see one place called uh, let's just say Mecca today, and then they might just say, well, this is the whole Arabian Peninsula. You see, just different names that they give. For example, another name that was referred to as that region that's called, for example, the Middle East or the Arabian Peninsula was known as Saba. One of the names was known as Havilah. You see? So it's all about unfoldment. And this is where our people begin to lose sight of the measure because they begin to say, well, that's not the same people here. But all you have to do is trace through the timelines and you will see why there were changes here and there. But I'm going to show you how far this name more extends back into the ancient time. And I just established it right here when you're dealing with the Lemurian aspect. Everybody familiar with that. That's common knowledge. The root of the word is key without the vowels. You see? Because if you had taken away all the vowels, you would just have M and Ara. So you will find M and Ara as the root that can be traced back all the way into antiquity, though you may have it spelled in many different ways, two O's and an Ara or M-A-U-R-A. This is still referred to the same people. And it had to do with a change in dialect, a change in language as time continued to carry on. Just as you have different dialects in any other language. You have a dialect in Spanish that may be Cuban. Then you have the Mexican, dialect. Then you have many other aspects of it. And even some of the meanings of the words may not mean exactly what they mean in certain aspects, but then there are certain words that are germinated, so to speak, in the aspect of where they stay the same at their root. Right? So, dealing with this, now that we establish who these Lemurians is, they are the inhabitants of Adlan or Adlan, this same region that is called the Garden of Eden, also known as Canaan, would also, according to our teachings, we would refer to these as the ancient Canaanites. Not Canaanite in the aspect that you perceive it, but Canaanite because this is known as Canaan land, right? So we refer to them as the ancient Canaanites. Same people, no different, right? Now, also another measure, on a higher degree, is where you deal with who you call the Ancient of Days. The Ancient of Days is mentioned in the book of Daniel, saying that when he came forth, this is when the books of the law was open. And when he opened up the books of law, this was basically supposed to be the time when creation began. But the Ancient of Days was described as a man with woolly hair. You see, I gave an example in my timeline, in my pictures of this Ancient of Days. You see? But let us go on. But here you have our people referred to as the Ancient Ones. You often hear us in the Moorish American government refer to ourselves as the return of the Ancient Ones. This is not just loose talk when we say this. When we say that we are the return of the Ancient Ones, we really are meaning that we are the return of the Ancient Ones, because as we read earlier, we are what our forefathers were yesterday, without doubt or contradiction. So these people, you're going to find pretty much moved pretty much all around the world. You already know that as well now. I don't even really have to go into that. But we just making a point because we tracing ourselves back. So dealing with the Ancient Ones and the Atlanteans, you hear a lot of different stories about them on how they had supernatural abilities, a power. Now, some people like to say, okay, this is spooky. But many people believe that Yehoshua, Jesus, has supernatural abilities. They believe that he had the power to resurrect the dead, to raise the dead, right? They believe that most prophets had the ability to demonstrate what we call miracles. Even before Yehoshua or Isa, Jesus, you had Elijah, who was able to resurrect and raise the dead and so forth and so on. But you didn't see people trying to worship, Elijah. His power was even passed on to Elisha. When Elisha died, and they said that there was a war and the Moabites was involved. One of the Moabites fell in the tomb, of Elisha, not knowing that his body was there, touched his bone. They say he was revived. He came back. Now we can look at this physically if we wish, or we can look at this from an esoteric standpoint. And when you're dealing with esotericism, you're dealing with the inner interpretation of a thing. You're talking about an adept understanding when you talk about esotericism or metaphysics, right? So nevertheless, however you look at it, the Moabite was revived after touching the bones of Elisha, who had received the double portion of Elijah's spirit. Elijah is often mentioned as well as being John the Baptist, where it spoke of John as being Elijah. It say, if you are willing to receive it, he is Elijah who was to come. This is reincarnation, or what we call the transition of power from one God man to the next, right there in the biblical text. You see, now all of these things would be considered supernatural, nothing spooky, but we can show you the same thing in this era and time. The form may change, but the spirit is the same. And that comes from the time of Adam as a prophet all the way down to Ali. The same spirit that was in Adam is the same spirit that was in every other prophet that came on the manifest. You see, this is why we always stress the fact that death is not an enemy to man. There's no such thing as a death. There's no such thing as an end, right? So when you go a little further into this special drawing, again, there are no supernatural acts, so to speak, that we are referring to here, along the lines of spookism. We are letting you know the types of powers that our ancestors had. You talking about divine sovereignty. You talking about omniscience. You're talking about omnipresence. You see? Yeah, omnipotency. All of those are special drawings. Being able to cross the borderland at will. You hear people talk about this, being able to astral travel. Our prophet said that he would be in one place, speaking, and then he would be somewhere else in a whole nother country at the same time. And this is in spirit. This is not spookism. You see? So, as we go on, we now go into, since we spoke on these different levels of creation, we can go a little into the Lemurian or the Elmurian people, the ancient Canaanites, as we know them to be, There's another measure in regards to dealing with this, because we always hear about what we call the Seven Elohim, who created everything that is, was, and ever more to be. And I like to say ever more, M-O-O-R, right? To be. The Elohim. They were the ones who gathered the dust for the Creator. They were the ones, who began to move the elements, so to speak. It was him doing it, but these are his powers that he utilized in order to work. You see? So when you go into dealing with this aspect, that's why you'll see us stating in our adept questionnaires that it was the Elohim, that gave you the physical body. Even when there was an act of reproduction that's on the manifest, the Elohim are at work on the cellular level. The great God using the Elohim as his instruments, or his, we can say, those that are employed to do his bidding, once they are done forming this special structure in the form of a human being, be it male or female, then he breathes within, that special vessel, that vessel may become a living soul. You see? And that's where we go back to spirit clothed with soul made in the form of God. So, the Elohim are known in ancient Chemic as the Neteru. And the Neteru are also called the seven Ali. You see, the seven eyes of Allah. I like to say the Alihim. You see, Elohim Alihim, right? When you go into these Elohim, I'm going to give you a measure from this reference, so y'all know that we ain't just making this up. This is old work. You see when that was wrote? I had this book right here going on about 30 years now, but I had it for a long time. It's one of my favorite works right here. Real universal work. Masterminds, I already probably read this book right here. This book, it's got some fire in it. I just put it that way. It's most definitely for adepts. But they give definition of the Elohim here. And think about everything that I just said. It states the Elohim, sons of God and creators of the world, or rather fashioners of it, in 6 days, resting on the 7th. They were but euphemising powers of nature, the fateful manifestation, fateful manifested servants, the laws of him who is immutable law, and harmony himself. The earthly Elohim, tradition tells us, lived on an island which for unparalleled beauty and had no rival in the world, They were the remnants of a race that preceded ours, the race that could live with equal ease in water, air, or fire. For the race, it had unlimited control over the elements. It was they who imparted nature's secrets to man and revealed to him the now lost word, which lingers in a far-off dying echo in the hearts of some today. Hierophants of all the sacerdotal colleges had knowledge of this island, but the word was only known to the Java Elohim, who was the chief lord of every college and who at the moment of his death passed it on to his successor. There were many of these colleges of which old classic authors speak. The Great Mother was known as the Living Word, whose 7 great stars were the Elohim. Powerful, powerful measure here. Now, we notice that it said that these ones were able to move with ease through the elements of earth, air, water, fire. As a matter of fact, if you break it down, the Elohim are often depicted upon the walls of many different structures throughout the annals of time. Whether you go into ancient Chemic, Sumeria, or if you come here and you see those ancient engravings upon the walls here, the Elohim are often depicted, as the man, frame having the head of an ox or the head of a falcon or eagle and so forth and so on, right? Or the head of a lion, and then merely man. So when you break it down, a lot of times you have Elohim. Really, you have E-L-O-N-M, eagle, lion, ox, and man, right? So this is Elon. The he represents the divine spirit. If these 4 E-L-O-M represent entities, so to speak, then the spirit is the supreme entity that is able to unite these forces in work in order to bring about in a special measure of what we call creative fate. And this is how life comes into being. You see? Okay, in a vessel or in a form, or not just the human life, but plant life, any form of the mineral life down to the cellular levels, or when you're dealing with creation and you're dealing with the planetary spheres. As it is above, so it is below. The macrocosm and the microcosm. Everything that exists in creation exists within yourself as well. That's why man is called the microcosm. He's a reflection of the greater universe, the greater creation. This is often referred to as the heavenly man. You see, Ancient of Days, right? So when you begin to speak of the Atlanteans or the Lemurians, you have to have this in mind. And then you can understand how they were able to build a super civilization. A super civilization. It's a lot of symbolism that's even involved in the way that you would see the symbol of the way the city is shaped. It's a circle, and you would often see one that is similar to our quadratic expression of the circle 7, with the 4 gates in it. If you look at Atlantis and you pull it up right now in an image, you will see something similar to that. You see? And so again, the power of Atlantis or the Atlanteans was the world over. But these inhabitants, the Lemurians, these people, they are the ancient ones, right? And we're gonna get a little bit more up into it though, now that we established that. So now that we know that spirit man is one aspect of man, this is the true aspect of man. You see, the part of man that doesn't die. You see, this is the part of man that has endless possibilities. This is the part of man that is able to do any and everything that he will himself to do. You see? Because being spirit, you can only be the will of the creator, the great God Allah. And see, this is why you often hear us say that there's a difference between the expression of Muslim and Muslim when we are speaking on an adept level of being Moorish Americans. Muslim simply means one who submits to the will of Allah. Muslim is one who is the will of Allah. That's not an arrogant statement. That is saying that you have given up your will and you have conformed to the laws of divinity, and now every thought, every way, every act, every deed is all for the great God. So much, to where subconsciously it's your first mind to move accordingly. This is the nature of an angel, right? Because angels don't disobey the Creator. They move accordingly. This is the nature of an angel. You see? So, spirit man, clothed with soul, made in the form of Allah. We call this flesh divine. We call this flesh divine. So a lot of time when you hear people saying, man, they hear stories about, for example, the adept that was raised by a prophet, the brother, the Prince of Peace, our German Bey. There are people, who say that they have seen this man transmute, be at the podium one minute and come, through the back door the next minute. You hear, the yogis speaking about being able to walk through structures. You see, these are the possibilities of man, not spookism. I'm talking about with the power of being able to exercise holy breath, ones even raise their physical up from the ground. We call it levitation, right? But all of this has to do with mind power. And this is why you have to have a pure heart and a pure mind. Because if not, the weight of the world won't allow you to become, as such. Your heart or your consciousness should never outweigh your spirit. There should be a ma'atic balance. That's why in ancient Chemic, if you ever seen the depiction right there on matter of fact, in my the page background that I have, you'll notice that the heart is being weighed against a feather. You see? And you would say, well, how is it that a feather would ever outweigh the heart? Because the feather is symbolic to spirit. Spirit is far more weightier than the blood pumping organ called the heart, or even your own consciousness, unless that consciousness is balanced and one with the Creator. And that's where the balance comes from. You see? But even greater though, when the spirit outweigh your own judgment, your personal judgment, your own understanding. If you guided by the spirit, then you guided aright. This is what it means to be a rightly guided one. So nevertheless, this is the nature of spirit man, spirit clothed with soul, flesh divine. So anytime you think of, the ancient Canaanites, you're not just dealing with merely a physical man. You see? Or like you hear us say Moorish. A lot of people think Moorish just mean those who are trying to be Moorish, or those who are living according to a Moorish culture. But Moor and Ish is deep. It means as well that you are more God than you are mere man. That more of the spirit in you governs you than your flesh do. That's what it means to be Moorish. We go back to that Muslim, the will of the great God Allah made manifest in the flesh. This is what it means to be Moorish, Moorish. You see? So, as we go along, looking at the first man, well, we say the first man or the original is spirit. But there's also an original man manifest on the level of protoplast. Then there's a man manifested as the physical form. Though he is made up of the essence of protoplast, there was a first life form known as protoplast. As a matter of fact, protoplast coming from protoplastus, the word they use in what they like to call Greek, but we know that what's called Greek is really ancient Phoenician, which actually is ancient Demotic, going back to the Chemic language. So in all actuality, it means the first formed. And often this is referred to at the cellular level along the lines of an atom. ATOM. I like to say Allah, the original mind. That was one of the things I would always say in my earlier years of studying Allah, the original man. You see? And then when you go into the Comedian word Atum, A-T-U-M, which is the first God man who was self-created and rose up from the mound in ancient Chemic to create and bring life into existence, that's the same characteristics of an atom bringing life into existence from science. But Atum in its concept was there long before the scientists came up with the concept of what an atom is scientifically. So Atum, the universal mind. Allah, the universal mind. Atum. You see, the first life form made manifest, right? So when you go into this special aspect and we understand, okay, you have spirit man as an original man, you have protoplast as an original man in the beginning, then you have also on the physical, the original physical man made manifest. And this is why many people lose sight of a clear conception. In fact, if you are your mother's first son, then you are the original man, that have a lineage that come from you. You are the Adam of your family. Noah was an Adam of the people that he came to bring on the man. Abraham was the Adam of the people he came. Ishmael was the Adam of the people he came forth to bring forth. Moab was the same as an atom of those who would have come from him. And we can go on and on and on with it. You see? And we're going to touch on this right here since we are there. Because we want to make it plain and make it clear. Let you know that we don't just be Wikipedia researching. We got tools over here. And I like to come from the sources, when I show and prove, from sources that everybody bear witness to. That way, they can't say, oh, that source right there is questionable. You see? Now, this is based off of sound Islamic knowledge. If you know anything about Islamic mysticism, and you are familiar with the works of the likes of Ghazali, Imam Ghazali, or those of Zul Noon, the works of Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi, then you know what Islamic mysticism is, or what they call tasawwuf, or what they call Sufism, right? So, Adam, this is the definition they give here. I want you to listen closely, bearing in mind everything that I just said prior to this definition that I'm giving. Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi, the great Muslim mystic, says that he saw a tablet of a building which showed that the building was erected hundreds and thousands of years ago. And again, he says that once he saw himself in a vision performing pilgrimage with some other people. I inquired one of them, "Who are you?" He said, "Of your old ancestors." "How long is it since they died?" I asked him. The man replied, "More than 40,000 years. But this period is much more than that. What separates us from Adam?" said I. The man replied, "Of which Adam are you speaking? About that Adam who is nearest to you, or some other?" Then I recollected the saying of the Holy Prophet to the effect that God had brought into being no less than 100,000 atoms. And between each and every atom, there's a period of 17,000 years. And I said to myself, perhaps these people who are said to be the ancestors of mine were of the previous atoms. You see? And basically, this particular definition is given based upon the portion where it speaks of the different races that existed prior to Adam of 6,000 years ago. In other words, these would be the pre-Adamites. Even though being, Adamic in their own right, they were, before or prior to others. And this is why you often hear man being referred to as a Khalifa or a successor. In one aspect, yes, he is second to God, being a ruler upon the earth. He has that capacity. But then another, he is also a successor to those who come behind them. In the line of any silsila, a grand chain of narration, you often have those who succeed through the line of those who come behind them. For example, you heard us speak of the prophet. And then you heard us speak of the adept that he taught as R. German Bey. And the brother R. German Bey, the Prince of Peace, conferred the title Swift Angel upon the Grand National Chairman, Dr. Akhenaten Pert M. Heru Tutankhamen Bey, known as Elihu Pleasant Bey. You see? And then he then conferred the degrees upon us that he received. You see? So, oh yeah, we're going to go down through there. So, in this particular measure, that's why it speaks of the aspects of dealing with this concept. It says the Holy Quran does not follow the Bible in holding that the world began with the birth of the Adam, and neither the Holy Quran claim that all mankind who are now found in different parts of the world are of the progeny of the same Adam, or that all the races which lived before this Adam were entirely swept away before he was born. It's saying that the Quran doesn't agree with that there were no other people on the manifest before, the Adam of 6,000 years came into existence. Adam was not the first man in that sense. Mankind existed even before him. He was a Khalifa, a successor who followed someone, right? It even spoke of the jinn, the him, and the din that were on the manifest, and it referred to them as different races of people, referred to them as what a lot of people like to call the Neanderthal, the Cro-Magnons, and, so forth and so on, right? So, nevertheless, as we move on, we just want to cover all of that because it's key that we cover these as special measures to bring clarity. Also, another measure to be pointed out here. It also says the word Adam also stands for the children of Adam and for the human being who is not the object, the crown, and the acme of all creation, and whose creation became complete after a long process of gradual development and evolution by Rob. And Rob is an attribute of the great God, which has to do with one who evolves. So it say who fosters and brings up and regulate things from the crudest state to that of the highest perfection in such a manner as to make it attain one condition after another until it reaches its goal of completion. Rob is the author of all existence, who has not only given the whole creation its means of nourishment, but has also beforehand ordained for each sphere a capacity within that sphere, provided with the means by which it continues to attain gradually to its goal of perfection. And this is why you hear us always speak of the masterminds who come throughout the climes and the times, and how we measure cycles by time by cycle ages, because there are periods of perfection that come on the manifest. And this is why you had a succession of prophets who came to uplift a people, or a succession of master teachers who came, that in which one was not able to perfect, then another one would come on the manifest to finish or complete the work. All of this being a part of the grand scheme of the Creator. Therefore, man himself being an instrument of the Creator as well. Remember, man in his spiritual state was also amongst the Elohim. Eagle, lion, ox, and man, Elohim, being directed by he, the spirit, who. You see? These are even chanted as mantras. He, who, right? In high circles. So, now that we have this knowledge about man and an existence of this man and his possibilities, dealing with that first man made manifest as a physical now, the original man, we have some understanding as to that. And often you hear our prophet also refer to us as Asiatics and Muslims. Now, many of us, when we deal with the term Asia, we can go into the aspect of dealing with Laurasia, or as we have the definition, Asia means earthbound. That's actually in the book of Ali as well. You know, that's the definition, the adept definition that was given to us by the chairman. And then there is another measure in regards to dealing with the adept science of Asia when you understand the knowledge of the Kabbalah. And there are 4 worlds that are mentioned. The 4th world is known as Asia, spelled Assiah, Asia. And this is said to be the material or the manifest world as a whole. So when you speak of the Asiatics and Asia being the whole of the world, this is what you are referring to, the material, the manifest plane. You see? So this goes back to those that are Asiatics and Muslim. This is also known as the world of action as well, Moorish kid. This is known as the world of action. You see? Hold up. One second, Moorish kid. Okay, so also when you get to dealing with this, a special one that we spoke of again, you know, and we get into the physical aspect, you know, again, we get into the word protoplast. You know, we have by definition that it has to do with fundamental entity, the primordial living unit, a cell, a person, a thing that is first formed, original prototype. You know, and this can go for on all aspects. Spirit man being the original spiritual prototype. You know, the atom being the first elemental prototype, and then the physical man. You have that first man on the manifest, you know, who is also known as Adam Kadmon. You know, Adam Kadmon, also known as Adam God Man. You know, that's my ad on there. You know, Adam Kadama, if you go into the Arabic. You see, so when we study these things, we study it from every aspect. You know, we don't just study from one source. That's why you hear me quoting many different sources. A lot of times you hear me speaking in one area because I'm trying to drive home with the hammer of repetition a certain portion to make sure that our Moorish kin have understanding. Because I know many of us have questions, because I had questions, and that's what caused me to do this intensive research, right? Going on, you know, since we know, you know, how man is made and so forth and so on, we still want to deal with the Lemurian aspect, or the Elmurians, you know, because all of this is tied up into the same measure. The first instructor or the first teacher of the Atlanteans, was one of Lemuria by the name of Tehuti. Tehuti, often referred to in Greek, as they like to call it, as Thoth, often referred to even in our Moorish Holy Quran along those lines. Tehuti is also known biblically as Enoch. Not only is he known as Enoch, but Akhnut, if you go into the Quran, or Idris, you see, which is often referred to by the Greeks as well as Hermes, Trismegistus, you see, thrice time great, as they call it. Dealing with that special drawing, you're talking about the same entity. So if you are familiar with the Emerald Tablets of Tehuti, you see a lot of the activity that is referred to about the 7 creative spirits, or those, we can call them the pre-Adamites, or those demigods, so to speak, that were on the manifest from a spiritual aspect. And he was said to be the last priest when Atlantis fell, and the people of Lemuria fell. So he was the one who took the teachings into Chemic. He took the teachings into Chemic, and one of his first student adepts was Osar, who we call Osiris. He taught Osiris, and Osiris began to educate in that special region, and that's how Egypt is said to become the civilization that it became. Tehuti is also synonymous with divine mind. It's not just the vessel. Tehuti was synonymous with what we would like to call the everlasting gospel. He was able to manifest, throughout many eras in time, under many different aliases, so to speak. Anytime you hear about Al-Qidr, the green one, Melchizedek, or anytime you hear, about a Mahdi or Christ, you're dealing with divine mind. So this is synonymous with the concept of Tehuti. So this is how one would often say, even Dhul Nun, who is known as the father of Sufism, that was from Egypt, he too would tell you that he received his teachings through Tehuti. If you go into the Masonic measures and dealing with the Lodge and their origin of their history, they would tell you that their history comes through Enoch, who is really Tehuti. You see? So, if everybody is tracing themselves back to this special entity, just under different names or whatever the case may be, according to the culture, then there has to be truth involved with this. We know that divine mind is what manifests and teaches. Divine mind is in you. Divine mind is what taught you. Divine mind is the true Hereford that teaches you. You see? Like they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And it's not necessarily the student, listening to someone that is outside of the student, but the student listening to someone that is awakening their mind to listen to divine mind within themselves. Because the teacher was within you already. So all Tehuti did is wake Osiris up to the God that was in him. Every prophet that was on the manifest, when an angel came to him, the angel Jibril, when he delivered, the message of Yehoshua, he was letting them know where Emmanuel, one would come, God with us. Wasn't saying that he was the supreme being. Just as the great God told the angels in the Quran, he said, when you go before this man here that I'm about to manifest, prostrate yourself, bow down, fall down into obeisance unto him. He wasn't telling you to worship that man. He was telling you to bear witness to his spirit that he placed in the man. You see? And this is where many of our people get taken off with a misunderstanding as well. So nevertheless, divine mind, has always came in the vessel of a divine man, which often ended up being a prophet, which is why we say our definition of a prophet, for example, is not the same as the European definition of a prophet. Our definition of a prophet is a thought of Allah manifested in the flesh. So it is with an angel, a thought of Allah manifested in the flesh, right? Spirit man, a thought of Allah manifested in the flesh. Divine mind, made manifest. Simple. Know thyself and thy Father God Allah. Stop serving gods outside of the self, for he is within you. Know ye not the temple of God, that ye are the temple of God, pardon self, and the Spirit of God dwelleth within you, which temple you are. So this is what it means to build a temple of perfected man. Or as they say in the NOI, become civilized. How do you think that Osiris or Osar was able to civilize Chemic? Or bring in what we call the ancient civilization of Chemic. He himself had to become civilized. He had to become civil. He had to tap into the immortal virtues of his soul, having the ability to think, will, reason, understand, and remember that he came from the source, Islam, right? But let us keep going on. So now that we have a knowledge of Akhnut, I encourage our Moorish people, Enoch, Tehuti, to, if you haven't, read the Emerald tablets. If you don't have them handy, you can type it in, Emerald tablets of Tehuti, and you'll learn about, the activities, of antiquity in regards to dealing with these beings that I'm referring to. Or the book of Enoch also goes into a lot of that. The book of Enoch and the book of the Emerald tablets, they are basically the same text. Matter of fact, the book of Enoch, the true book of Enoch, was the one that they found in the Ark of the Covenant. And it was said to be found in Ethiopia. You see? But that's a whole nother measure. Nevertheless, it said he was taken up into the heavens. He didn't see a death. It tell you that Enoch, according to the Islamic tradition, Idris or Akhnuk, it said that he was the one that went into Egypt. He went into Chemic, just as I just told you about Tehuti going to teach Hausa. It said that he established the original teaching. So prior to those who are known as Egyptians in this era and time that deviated, and it really wasn't them, it was those that usurped the throne and didn't know what was going on, and they innovated certain worship, idol worship into the culture. It wasn't the original people, but the people fell victim to this usurpation, because they had deviated from the way. They originally had the way or the truth. That's what made them powerful. That's why their civilization is a sign for us today. They had the truth. Enoch, Tehuti was their messenger. That was the prophet that was sent to the ancient Chemites, not Moses. Moses was sent to deliver the Israelites, you see, from the hand of the Pharaoh or the Pharaonic dynasties, which really came into existence through the Hyksos, the Hyksos, you see, which is what the name of those who come from Mount Caucasus. And we're going to get into how those came from the north and pushed the darkest seed into the south. And that's why you can see in the continent of what we call Africa today, most of the seed of the darkest hue in many different olive tone complexions, they are in the southern regions. Seems like it happened like that even when you come over here, though. In West. So nevertheless, let us keep moving on. So nevertheless, there was a time where what they would call antediluvian period would come on the manifest. Deluge, period of the deluge, which is often known as the Great Flood, which we refer to as the Great Earthquake. Somewhat like that which deals with it along the line of a tsunami. You see, that took place during that special time period. And everything was said to be destroyed. And it had to do with a mentioning of it saying that angelic beings slept with the daughters of men. And this brought forth giants and renown, men of renown. This had to do with those super humans, so to speak. You see, this was said to be a corruption for this truth and this falsehood to be strangely mixed. Angelic, mingling with the flesh. You see? And so having those powers, this is where the wonders come from of them being able to build certain things that's still unexplainable in this era and time that have become wonders of the world to the masses, right? Nevertheless, we descend from such renown and great ones, the ancient of days, right? So nevertheless, there came a time following behind one known as Enoch, that or Tehudi, that one come on the manifest by the name of Noah, as they say, right? Who is known actually as Menachem. You see, and Menachem, in matter of fact, let me see. I think I got it over here. I'm looking for my book of, here it is, right here. I got so much around here, Moors King. The book of Jasher. Moors, you got to get this book if you don't have it. This book explains a whole bunch of history that is missing from the Old Testament. It speaks a lot about the ancient Canaanites. It even mentioned Osiris in here. It goes into an extensive history and fill in a lot of the blanks. But Noah, referred to as Menachem, and you notice that Cam is in the root, and people say, well, where did Noah, what was the name of the land that he was from? Remember, you're dealing with Atlan. You're dealing with prior to the flood at the time. You see? And so this is the first land, the first, people, before things was separated, before there was a continental drift. And so so forth and so on. So when you deal with Menachem, Noah, it's at the root of that name if you listen carefully. When you deal with him, in the land he inhabited, the same as again Atlantis or Havilah, same region. He was the one that was said to repeople, after this destruction came on. The wisdom that came along with that, wisdom was brought along through his seed, his sons, Ham being the eldest of Ham. You see? Sometimes you will see it spelled Kham. The K is removed. That's why they call it Ham. Or sometimes you will see it Cham, a him, right? Dealing with the same special measure. So now you know what Chemic come from, or the Chemites. Hamites, as they like to call it, right? European will tell you that's us. So dealing with all of this, it was a time where things took place. Nevertheless, these sons came on the manifest, and they was really one people. All of the evolution of them becoming other than what they were, that came with change over time, mingling and all this and that there, because, when those who came out of that region of the mountainous region began to mix with people, that changed hues, because they were in that area for a long time. You got to remember, when the serpent was cast down, and this is another thing, before the physical man came on the manifest, the serpent was already cast down. into the manifest. You see? And so therefore, those who were cast down, remember I told you the jinn and all that was on the manifest and different spiritual hosts. These jinn that came from the heavens, you see, they were actually exiled into the Caucasus Mountains. Now think about those who were cast out from the descendants of Adam and Eve, who were ran into that special area, the land of Nod, and they go up into that mountainous region. And those spirits are already there. Not only will their hue change for them being up there in that special region, that cold region for some time, just as you see, if we go into the sun, we become darker. But if we go into a cold region, or if we just stay in the house, we become lighter. Imagine somebody being in that state for years, talking 2,000, 3,000. So basically, this is what you look at. This causes a degeneration in the pigmentation. You see, the pineal gland becomes calcified and no longer melanin is produced as it should be, right? So not only did one degenerate, physically, but even on the level of dealing with the soul, it begins to degenerate. So this now becomes a willing host or a vessel for that lower energy, lower self energy to be able to use as a conduit, so to speak. And that's why when those people came out of that mountainous region and they began to come from the north and make war and infiltrate Chemic, infiltrate all these different civilizations of Atlan and everywhere, that's why a lot of the seed was pushed to the southern region as they fought to hold their ground. And that's why mostly across North Africa now, when you see those that are of a lighter hue, it is due to the amalgamation of those who came out of those regions. And then they spread abroad. And this is where you get your so-called Europeans as you see them today, your Chinese as you see them today, your Turks as you see them today. But if you originally go into these original places, they were not of that original, they were not of the unoriginal look, so to speak. We look the same everywhere. So nevertheless, again, what I'm saying is Noah gave birth to one likeness in a seed, not many different. Them individuals known as Ham, Shem, Japheth, these special ones were basically the same hue. The change came later. Now the European would teach you that this was black man, white man, Chinese man. This is how they would try to get one over on you. But now you know. So just go do the research. You can research it while I'm doing it now, or you can do it later. But I guarantee you everything I'm saying, I can back it up. And I done showed you certain sources already. So now we're here. So dealing with Ham and those who came from him, because we can say, became the most plentiful in producing his progeny, his bloodline, so to speak, the most dominant, so to speak. Ham gave birth to one by the name of Cush. From Cush came, and we hear the prophet talking about this because we read it, in Egypt, capital empire and dominion, right? And he told you that we're talking about the ancient Cushites and so forth and so on, right? But he said that Ham was the one that moved in the southwest and northwest Africa. Cush was in southeast and northeast Africa, his son. You see? So through the line of Cush, you have two dynasties. You have what you call the Medo Cushite dynasty, and you have what you call the Indus Cushite dynasty, often known as the people of Sumer or Sumerian civilizations in that special area or region. You see? Now notice the term Meru, Su-Meru. Notice the term Lumeru. See, Meru, Lemurian, Mur, that M and that Aura is there at the root, right, of this people. So then when you go a little further into this special measure, you find out that the Indus Kushite civilization are known today. Some people refer to them as the Dravidians, or the Indus Valley Kushite civilization. But these were still Kushites. They came from the line of Kush. The Mezra Kush are those who went to inhabit the portion of the land known today as Abyssinia, often known, some people like to call it Ethiopia. But then you have in the Arabic, they are referred to as Hibachi, or simply known as Saba, S-A-B-A, or S-E-B-A. So the son of Cush is known as Saba. Which Sabar means seven in one aspect. Also sometimes referred to, you will see Sheba, S-H-E-B-A. You see? And you heard the nation, where they say, well, the original man came from the holy city of Mecca, and then he went into the jungles of Africa, you see, and then basically to tame the wild beasts is what they used to say, and bring civilization in. All that's really more science under other language, but I wonder why, if Shabazz is the tribe that the NOI say they come from, they never took that name, as their tribal name, and they continue to use the word black. That's just a measure I'm putting out there. Not to be slighting the family or nothing like that. That's just a thought. So nevertheless, Shabazz Enroute, known by the adepts, the Sufi adepts, it has to do with the Shabazi Ruh, S-H-A-H-B-A-Z. And then you will see hyphen I hyphen Ruh, R-U-H, Ruh as in spirit. So it is known as the noble spirit that soars to the heights. You often hear the nation say, well, Shabazz mean a bird in flight. All of this goes back to the symbolism when you deal with the comedian expression of Heru, the hawk, which you will see on the dollar bill that the United States tried to copy with their eagle. Also the Achaemenid dynasty, they actually kept the Shabazz as a symbol in their flag. You can look that up as well. Nevertheless, this is synonymous where it speaks of a spirit ascending or descending as a dove, this bird in flight, so to speak. In the Grand Quran, it says that the spirit ascends and descends in a period as if it were 50,000 years. So you see where that particular teaching, is rooted from. But nevertheless, the people of Sabar mentioned in the Quran and in the biblical text, you see, coming from the line of Kush. I'm showing you that there are connections between all of our people as we go down the line dealing with, these people. But yet the Shabazz are descendants of the Meru. It is also known in the culture of the Indus Valley civilization of the Meru Mount, the mountain of Meru. M-E-R-U. And then also spelled M-E-R-O-E, in the teachings when you go back to the Saba Meru. Nevertheless, these are the same people. Through etymology, you are able to trace your people. All you need is a map and etymology, and you can trace yourself back. It's as simple as etymology alone. A lot of these teachings come from etymological research, and I didn't just fix suddenly. I tried and I tested and I went through every aspect or avenue, and looking at this stuff before I came to the conclusions that I came to. So, nevertheless, this brings us to the point of Cush also producing one, as we spoke of the Samiru. When he produced Samiru, they actually came through Nimrod, who built the Tower of Babel, often referred to as the people of Shinar. You see, this is all the people of Sumer, but they still come from that Cushitic bloodline, which is also the same bloodline that Abraham came from. So if Abraham was of that bloodline, of the Sumerian bloodline, the Cushitic bloodline, and then he married, well, we don't say married, but we'll just say he had a seed from Hajar. That's the main key, who was an Egyptian or a Chemic, and they gave birth to Ishmael. This would mean that Ishmael was of the olive tone because his father was a Cushite. His mother was a Chemite. You see, same thing, a bloodline, right? This would mean that Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah would have to also be of that ancient Comedian bloodline too then, right? You see, not only did he also have, a Comedic wife as well, producing Fatima. If you go into the history of it, you will see that Moses, took a woman from the same regions, the Cushite bloodline. You see, this was not strange for prophets to do this. And God did forbid them to do this. If these were supposed to be unbelieving women, then, well, that's a whole nother matter. In fact, there's a whole city in Mount Sinai today that is dedicated to the sister Hajar, who is really known as Hathar, Hetheru, Hagar. That city, and this is where you see all the tablets where Moses went into Mount Sinai. And all of those tablets have inscriptions written upon them, known as Proto-Canaanite, Proto-Sinaitic, or the Moabite tongue. Pictorial expressions, Mudar, Meduneta, right? But let us proceed. So nevertheless, you're dealing with the people of Meru. You see? Coming through that special same lineage, now that we established those who were in the northwest and southwest regions, we can begin to move into those who came into parts of the northeast and southeast regions. Now we can come into the northwest and southwest regions. We deal with the Mezra. Mezra, or Moray, is often known as the land of Egypt, often referred to as Patamare. Tamare. You heard the brother Malachi York always speaking, on Tamare. You see the land of Chemic, Mare, the M-R, Mar. Even the term pyramid, M and R is there. Mir, M-E-R, that's what it's called. A mir, M-I-R, is also known as a master teacher or a pir and mir. This is in the Sufi teachings, if you ever studied the teachings of Hazarat Anir Khan. You see? Templar perfected man. That's the master teacher. In order to teach somebody perfection, you yourself have to be one of perfection. Okay? So nevertheless, Mezra, the land of Egypt. And Egypt is just a misnomer, so to speak. We use it because that's what the people are familiar with now, but we know the land was originally called Chemic. Egypt actually is referred to as Misraim, and that leads us to actually Enroute Mezra. That's M-E-S-R-A, Mezra. Mezra. You often see it spelled as well as M-I-S-R, Mezra. Hikapta, and the word Egyptian is derived from the word Hikapta. Hikapta going into the word Coptic. all rooted in the same special measure. That's another measure, right? But guess what, though? We said that Tehuti was the first priest of the Atlantean or Lemurian civilization who began to raise Asar, so to speak, through the adept degrees of self-mastery. So when you go a little further, we find out that the word Mar surfaces. And this word is spelled M-A-R-U. M-A-U-R, pardon self. Mar. And Mar is known as the Egyptian priest or the high priest of Anu. So if you are a high priest of Anu, you were referred to as a Mar, right? The Mars were those who actually, after Chemic fell, they were the ones who held on to the teachings and began to disseminate the knowledge, the wisdom, and the understanding and raise up different mystery systems throughout the world. And this is where all your different world religions, ended up becoming manifest from. You see, the Mars during that time. These same Mars, you're going to see them surface in the new era and time as a people, right? But that brings us now into dealing with the Moabba, or the Moabites. The Moabites, if you go into the root of the name Moab or Moabba, it means land of the father. Land of what father? Didn't we just say that Ham and his descendants, those who went with him, Cush, we know, went into northeast, southwest region of what we call Africa. Ham, he also took some seeds, 2 of them, to be exact, over into south, west, and northwest Africa. Punt being one of them, and then Canaan. You see, these are special ones. His grandsons, so to speak, his son, pardon self, they actually went over there with them. One of the 4, and you often see the 4 that's mentioned in the Comedian teaching, the 4 children of Enroute. It's not strange that they demonstrate that Ham had 4 of these main sons that were on the manifest, and different teachings and civilizations came through. So the Induas and the Kushites, the Medo Kushites, they went into India. Now we are talking about those who came into northwest, southwest Africa. So these ones that settled in this region, those of the land of the father, referred to as Moabites, descendants of the ancient Moabites, are also known, if you go into a map, and I posted that in my timeline, they were known as the Mozabites. Mozabites, Mozabites. Same thing, they are really the Mozabites in the region that we now call Morocco today. Those were the original inhabitants, which are, they say that they descend from the ancient Moabites. You see, if you go and look that up. These would be referred to also by modern scholars as the Ibero-Maurusians. The Ibero-Maurusians were said to be on the manifest over 20,000 years ago. And they were in a region that we are talking about, modern day Morocco, all the way down into Junea, Mauritania, Libya, all the way across the top. This whole area, there's a map that actually referred to this area as what? Atlantis. Wow. You see, that's in their tradition. And guess what? Just so happened to be, if you look at every map that speaks on the Atlanteans, they would say that the Atlantean Peninsula was in between the United States and, that special region in Africa. But that place right there on the west coast of Africa, where a lot of the slaves were taken from, It was actually known again across the whole place one time as Atlantis, but especially in them areas where they say a lot of slaves came from. So we the return of the ancient ones, but it get a little deeper because we dealing with this word more. We tracing ourselves back. Who were they? So again, the Ibero-Marusians, and the word Marusian actually derives from the word Mari, M-A-R-U, M-A-U-R-I, Mari, which goes back to that word of the ancient priests that came from Chemic, known as the Mar. You see? Only thing you have I at the end, the Mari and the Mar. These are the indigenous inhabitants of what we call modern day Morocco. But it was known, named by the Mari as Mauritania. So the root of the name Mauritania is that word Mari. This was not a name given to the people by the Latin. The Latin actually adopted that name into their language from the Berber Moors that were on the manifest when they came into contact with them. So they did not originate that name. That's false history when people tell you that. They did not give the Moors that name. The name Moor came from Mari. You see? So from that line of those who came on the manifest in Northwest and Southwest Africa, you had those who were known as Punt and Kanana or Canaan. These are special ones. They the ones that came and manifest your Tunisian people, Libyan, your Malians, Carthaginians, all of these are special ones. These were the Moors, Hannibal, and which, if you can see all of these people here, these are the same ones that ended up going through the Iberian Peninsula and going into Spain and conquering Spain, because they moved from the northern portion of Africa from Kemet all the way East Africa, all the way across the top region, and went into Spain. And they took culture, they took all of that with them. By this time, Islam on the manifest, Prophet Muhammad, peace, blessings be upon him, he done come on the manifest. So a lot of teachings were taught. In fact, a lot of people don't know, it was the Moors of Africa who spread Islam across the northern regions of Africa. It was not the Arabs. The Arabs brought the portion to them, but they took it to the next level. And the teaching that they spread it through was not Orthodox Islam. It was actually from the line of mostly the Shiite or even the Sufistic teachings that were carried over. That's why if you go into Morocco or different regions in Africa, you find a lot of Sufi tarikats. You see, most of the main tarikats are in Africa. Remember, Dhul Nun was from Kemet, from Egypt. So that's no strange happening. Remember, but the teachings of the Sufis come from Tehuti, right? So nevertheless, this term Mari is where the word Moor derives from. But what you do, if you go into the root of the word, remove the vowels, you're going to still see the M and you're going to see the R. So this is where you come into dealing with the Moors. And it was these, Moors that were known as the Al-Murabitun, the Al-Muwahidun. They were the first ones who set up, the Islamic center, so to speak, in the land of Morocco. They are the ones who named Morocco Marrakesh, or some people say Murakush. It was these who named it that. And then Morocco is actually an English expression of the word Marrakesh. So when you go into this history, and that also means land of God too, by the way, you know. So the Amazigh, the Berber Moors that were in that region, they come from the bloodline, of Chemic. Even those of the Comedian bloodline in South East Africa, the Somalis, they still have the language. Their language is said to preserve the original tongue of the ancient Kemites, but they are known as Shariftin. Shariftin meaning those who actually descend through the noble line of Muhammad. This is the Somali area, right? But those who are in the southwestern and northwestern region of Africa, that came through the culture of what we call Morocco and the religious aspects of it, they are descendants of the Alawite dynasty, meaning that they came through the lineage of Ali. You see? So Ali, already a relative of Prophet Muhammad, married, into the lineage as well. And this is what came forth to be known as the Pashtin Pak. And you see me post that in our page as well in the timeline yesterday. The Pashtin Pak is symbolic to the five-pointed open green star being inhabited through their bloodline. Muhammad represents one point, Ali and Fatima represent, the other points, and then their two sons, Hassan and Hussein, representing the other points. But Ali was the one that had a scimitar that was given to him. The sword of Ali, it is referred to, a double-edged sword. Muhammad was said to be given a scimitar by the angel Jibril. Tehudi was said to be the first to implement the use of the scimitar in ancient Kemet. And this is why when you hear us say the scimitar represents consciousness, it's being passed down from generation to generation. This consciousness is symbolic to saving power. So when you talk about the Moors and being able to trace yourself back, and thus that's what we're talking about when we speak of our history and our lineage and our ancestry. So anybody that may be outside of the teachings of the Moors, if you have heard what has been stated, or you listen to this, or you check it out later on down the line, there should be no reason as to why, you don't see your Moorish kin as your brethren, because we see you as ours. Because all of us come from the motherland. Many of us will say that we come from the cradles of civilization. But when you say, well, we come from this special portion in the cradle of civilization, many say, oh, no, and if you would dispute me in regards to dealing with this word black as opposed to Moor, try taking that word black and tracing it back into antiquity without using a European definition of saying, well, this word mean black or that word mean that. And you will see that this word black doesn't go nowhere beyond the English language. It's like the name God. Everybody understands this word God as God, but we know the Most High has many different names. But I can tell you this, the name Allah, for example, spread across all cultures. If you go into what they like to call Hebrew, for example, which is Proto-Sinaitic, Proto-Canaanite, you will see it spelled A-L-A-H, Allah. You will see in the Chemedian teaching, if you go into that language, you find out it's A-L-A-H-U, Allahu. And you can see it even in India and other cultures, even among the Vikings, Valhalla. I mean, we can go on and on and on and on with it. That's the only universal name of the creator that has the same derivatives all the way across the board. Also, the name Yahuwah. A lot of people say Yahweh, Yahuwah. Hu-He, known in Chemic. Yahweh. You see? A whole nother measure, same thing. Try that with black, though. Now deal with this word more at its root, the M and the R. You see that it derives from more. So now you understand what we mean when we say Moorish. We're not just dealing with some religious title. We are saying that we are more God than we are mere men and women. You see, our sisters, so to speak. So hopefully this brings clarity, because masterminds are able to trace themselves back, and thus they know. Man knows not by being told, but by being what he knows. So it's an honor to you, Moorish kin. I just wanted to bring that measure on the manifest, and bring some clarity to you. And hopefully our Moorish kin is able to grow from this special drawing that was given here. Because we are told that we are supposed to teach our people to be themselves. Not only do we have a nationality, but we have a divine creed. That nationality is Moorish American. Our divine creed is Islamism. And Islamism is not dealing with the aspects of being Arabized or ritualized into somebody else's culture. Islamism is the science of our ancient ancestors, coming straight forth from the heart of the great God himself. Self-mastery. Know thyself. Shadunetta. So therefore, Islamism is a way of life and a way of living. So that being said, grand people, I just say to you, this is a message of salvation, our God, and unity. And I ask that you take it, whatever you can take from it, and save yourself, that you may aid in saving your people. Because now's the time to unite. In unity, there's strength. Moorish movement, divine movement, everlasting movement. Peace and love. Shimo Temple Moorish kin.